Hello again, this is Jeff Scott, your instructor for 152-163 Relational Database Design for the Fall 2015 semester at Blackhawk Technical College, the online section. I am on page AC40 of our book, Microsoft Access 2013 Complete. And here it says, a database contains many kinds of objects. The only ones we've worked with thus far have been table objects. But there are also other objects such as query objects, which we're going to create right now, form objects, which we'll create next, and then report objects, which we'll create a little later. And that's what most of this book is about. So the steps that are shown, the 7 steps that are shown on pages 40, 41, and 42, use the simple query wizard to create a query that the Bavant Publishing Company might use to obtain financial information on its customers. They mention there that the query wizard is probably the quickest and easiest way to create a query. Alright, so this is what we're going to do. So, I can close the table. Do I want to save any changes I made? Yes, I do. Some data may be lost. That's okay. What they're saying is, remember, some of those fields were 255 characters, and we knocked them down to about 20. So that'll still be okay. All right. So what we want to do is click the tab that says Create. Every time you click one of these things right here on the menu, it brings up what are called different ribbons down here. We want to bring up the Create ribbon. And when we do, we want to click the Query Wizard tab. If you're following along, I'm on the bottom of page 40. Alright. So what we want to do is we want to bring up, we want to click OK, Simple Query Wizard, and we want the customer table, which is already there. Alright, so we want to put in the customer number. If we wanted to put in everything from here, all of these fields that you see here, we could click the double arrow. We don't want to do that, so I can bring them back like this. What we want to bring in is the customer number, so I highlight that one and click the single greater than sign. Then we want the customer name. And then we go down to amount paid, the current due, the returns, and the book rep number. Now, if we made a mistake, clicking the greater than sign takes the current field and moves it from the available fields to the selected fields. Clicking the less than sign removes whatever field is highlighted in the selected fields, and it returns it again to the available fields. So with book rep number selected, if I click the less than sign, it goes back there. Click the greater than sign, it's back there again. Now, they mentioned in the Q&A on the top of page 41 that if the book rep table were selected instead of the customer table, the fields that are shown there would be different. Alright, so we've done steps 1, 2, and 3. Now we're told to tap or click the next button that's right here. So again, what you see right here under the selected fields, customer number, customer name, amount paid, current due, returns, and book number, is exactly what you see in figure 1-55 on page AC41. Alright. Now we want the detail to be selected. Detail shows all the records and fields. Summary shows only the computations. In other words, like the total amount paid or whatever. We don't want that. That's step 4. Then we want to click Next again to go to the next screen. And they want you to name it Customer Query, but as I have been doing, I'm going to remove the blank space that's in there. Alright, and then we can click the Finish button. Now, think about this. If you do make a mistake, you can always go back, remove the query, and create another query. It's not a really big thing one way or the other. You'll notice that the icons are different, that the icon for a table looks kind of like a spreadsheet, and the icon for a query looks like a couple of spreadsheets almost put together. That's because when you write queries, you can query or get information from more than one table. Alright, so again, when we looked at the query, now if I go back over here and I right mouse click and I choose design view, now it's showing us all the components of the query. Down here, these are all of the fields that we selected. If for some reason we selected a field but we didn't want it to print, so if we didn't want the book rep number to print, we could click there and now it won't print. We do want it, so we'll put it there. So we're going to use some criterion now in our query. Alright, so that's step 1 on page 43. So what we want to do is we want to go over to the book rep number, and under criteria we want it to say, in fact, let's run the query again first. Okay, so you'll notice we get everything. We're going to rerun it because all we want is book rep number 53. Now we're getting all of the book rep numbers. If you remember, we put 4 of them in earlier. But if I right mouse click, go to design view, and under criteria for book rep, I put in there, I think I need to just say 53, not an equal or anything, just 53 like that. Alright, it puts it into double quotes, but if I run the query again, notice I only have the records for book rep number 53. Alright, so we're not supposed to save these changes that we just made. So the other, the author says when it comes and asks you to save, when you get out, just say no. We can also go back to design view and just remove this. Run the query again to make sure that it's okay. It is. So now I'm going to click save. Alright, if we wanted to print these now, and they show you this on the middle of page 45, I could go to File, Print, and Print Preview. It'll show you what it looks like, and you can see it. So what you see right here is the same type of thing that you see on figure 1-62 on the bottom of page AC44. Okay? Alright, so we can close the query. So we've come in and we've created one table manually. We created a second table by importing the data from Excel. Now we just created a query. The next thing we're going to do, starting on page 45, is to create a form. And as the author mentions on the bottom of page 45, a form is in a database is a formatted document with fields that contain data. Forms allow you to view and maintain data. They can also be used to print data, but they're not commonly used for that. Typically there you use a report. So we're going to come in and we're going to, again, we're going to go to create, and this time we're going to go to, I believe, form wizard. Let's see how they want us to do that here. Tap or click the form button, create tab forms group. So the button that just says forms on it. Okay? And you'll notice it says a field list appeared on my screen. What should I do? Alright. It says tap or click the form view button on the access status bar to go to form view rather than layout view. So here's layout view. There's design view, and we'll get into this in a later chapter. These two look pretty much the same right now. Now, we didn't do anything. and we got this. So in other words, if we go to print this right now, what we'll get is 15 pages, each customer on a page. So let's just take a look at the first customer. So we'll go to print, print preview. We'll again, okay, so there's the customer number, all right, the name, the street, the city, the state, the postal code, the amount they paid, what's currently due, returns, and their book rep number. And then you see the next one. And we get 15 pages of this. All right? So if we want to save this, right mouse click, choose save, and they ask us to save this as customer form. Again, I'm removing all blank spaces, even though they have it as customer space form. So I've got that, and now you see I've got a third column down there with customer forms. After you've saved a form, as they mentioned on the bottom of page 47, you can use it at any time by pressing and holding and right-clicking the form in the navigation pane. You can double-click on it. You can bring it up in a multiple number of ways. So let's create a report. I'm on page 48, so let's close this, and we'll create a report. So I'm on the bottom of page 48, and this section right here will take us to about all the way up to the middle of page 54. It says you will first create a report containing all fields, and the author mentions oftentimes it's easier to create a report with all fields than delete what you don't want. So this will save the initial fields. It says make sure the customer table is selected in the navigation pane, so it knows that by default. If we did it here, it would do a report based on the book rep form. We don't want that, or the book rep table. We want the customer table. All right, so again I click create. All right, to bring up the create tab, and on here you'll notice that we have a whole bunch of different things that are here. So we want to click the report right there, and you'll notice what it's given us. Now the line break here just means that it's too wide to print it the way it currently looks. All right, because it's by default it's going to display in a portrait format, which is higher, and as opposed to a landscape format. But notice if I come in here and do a file, and I do a print, and I go to print preview, okay, it's got the information, but again it's been cut off. So I should be able to come into here, page layout, go to landscape. All right, and it still doesn't bring it all in because we've got so many fields that we're printing that it's actually too wide for the area in which we have that. So how do you get around that? We're going to talk about stuff like that in later classes. All right, the next thing they ask us to do is to change the name here, and whoops, let's close this, and they want us to come into here, and you'll notice it's now called customer. They want it to be called customer financial report. That's all there is to changing the name. Boom. All right. Now they come in here and they talk about removing fields that are in here. So for instance, I believe, let's see, it says tap or click the select column button under report . Where we are. Don't need that. No. All right. They're telling us if we want to remove columns here, we can. lying if I said I knew exactly what I'm doing right now. So notice if I right mouse click, I can delete the entire column. So it looks like on the bottom of page AC51 in figure 1-74, we want to remove the street, city, state, and postal code. Alright, so street, I'm going to delete the column, and I can do multiple ones, but to me I'd rather do them one at a time. City and the postal code. So that was the street that we just removed. Here's the city, and here is the postal code. You'll notice now it just about all fits into here. Alright, in fact, if we come in here and we do another file, print, we go to print preview, and if we come back again to landscape, it says the section is greater than the page width and there are no items of additional spaces, so some pages may be blank. But the point is, virtually everything is in here right now. And I think well, maybe not. Thought we had headings, I might have removed those. I think that's what I accidentally did, is I did remove rows, so I removed the headings. Not a good thing to do. So let's close this. It's okay. I'm going to right mouse click on here and I'm going to close. Doesn't matter because I'm about to remove that, so I'm going to say no. So I'm going to go to my, I guess I didn't save. That's fine. So I've got customer highlighted still. Create. Let's go back to report. There's all the information. There's all my headings. So I'm going to come down to street and delete the column. And so we've got street, city, state, and postal code. There we go. Now it does all fit, and it's correct the way it is. So they also wanted us to come in here. I just double clicked on that and changed that to customer financial report. Alright, and I'm going to do a file, print, and a print preview, and now it looks pretty nice the way it is. Alright, plus if you notice it's got a final total down here for us. Looks a little funky right now, but that's okay. Alright, so I'm on step 4 on page AC52. What they want us to do is to type customer number and they want customer to be on one line and number to be on the next line. So let's close print preview view. Let's do this. I know there's a way to do this. I did a control break there to put it to force a hard break in there. So in here, we want this to say book rep number. So book space rep. Instead of a space, it's control enter number. Okay. And they talk about doing the other things that are in here. So in other words, we can come in here and in the amount paid field, we can change this from amount paid on one line to amount paid like this. And the current due, we can do the same thing. And the CU, I believe they want us to change that to customer name. All right, ideally what you're going to see now when we do another file, print, and we do a print preview is a little more, again, we'd have to play around with the spacing, and that's not really important right now. But we're starting to see some rhyme and reason to, hopefully, to what we're doing. And the author is also just allowing you to come in here and just check some of the stuff that you might want to start working with. Okay? All right, so the report, it says, contains totals for the amount paid, current due, and returns columns. You can use the layout view to add these totals. The following steps, this is page AC53, use layout view to include totals for these 3 columns. So tap or click, let's close this, tap or click the amount paid heading to select the field. Tap or click design on the ribbon to display the design tab. It's already there. Tap or click the totals button right here to display the totals menu. Tap or click sum to calculate the sum of the paid values. Use the same technique to add totals for the current due and the returns. Scroll down to the bottom of the report and verify that the stuff has been added. Oh, I thought I see the 2 that are there, but I don't see the last one, so let's check. And there they all are. All right. Again, we can always drag down on these to make them bigger. That's not really that big of a thing. All right, let's save this. And let's call this customer report, again with no blank space. Click OK. All right, one more time, go to File, Print, and Print Preview. And this time we'll go down to the bottom, and like I said, these are going to have to be widened out. All right. So let's close Print Preview, and let's see if we can do that. Notice I just widened them. I literally dragged on it and pulled down, and it changed all 3 of them. So I now have my final totals. Okay? That brings us up to the middle of page 54. And on page 54, they start talking about some of the database properties. And the author says here, Access helps you organize and identify your databases by using database properties, also known as metadata. And there are some keywords that are in there too. Since 5 types of properties exist, but the more common ones, the ones used in this book, are standard and automatically updated properties. Standard properties are associated with all Microsoft documents and include author, title, and subject. Automatically updated properties include file system properties like the date you created the file or the date you last changed it, etc. All right, so if we want to change the database properties, as mentioned on the top of page 55, we can tap or click File on the ribbon, and that opens up what's called the Backstage view. All right, and it says if necessary, even though it's there, we can click on the Info tab. It says click the View and Edit Database Properties that are right there. So you can see the information that's there. So if you wanted to, right now it's got me as author. If you know, I'm going to save all this stuff, and it will be out there on the system for you as we go through this. I will put this stuff in the in-class folder. All right. So I'll have that out there for each chapter, and you can take a look at it and make changes to it accordingly. All right, then on the bottom of page 55, they talk about if you're signed in to a Microsoft account, and we're not. So at least I'm not. So I'm going to skip that section. And I'm going to move up to page 56. So we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, about 8 more pages to go here. They talk about special operations, special database operations on page 56. And the author talks about recovering a database. The idea is anything, this is kind of a magical way to put this. People say, well, should I back this up? And, whatever the file is, whatever the information is. And my answer when people ask that question is, well, if you lost it, what would be basically the effect of losing it? And if you say, well, geez, that would just kill my business, well, then of course you want to back it up. Now we've got a gentleman who worked at Blackhawk. He retired a couple years ago, and he's a good friend of mine named Doug Tabbitt, who said you want to back up, then you want to back up the backup, and you want to back up the backup of the backup. And that might sound like a little bit of overkill, but again, it just depends. If you're Amazon, not only are you backing up, you're backing up every few minutes in case there's a problem with your database. So if we wanted to, in here, if we wanted to make a copy of this, we could do a save as. All right? Save database as, and we could save it either as another Access database in the default format, or we could save it as a different type of Access file or whatever. All right? So there's a lot of different ways that you can do this. Okay? All right, I'll let you read that on your own. Compacting and repairing a database on page 57. The author says, open the database that you want to have compacted. Well, ours is already open. In fact, let's go in and close. Yeah, we'll save that. Okay. Again, you notice that the report has got a different icon also. Okay, so in this chapter, we manually created the book rep table. Well, we manually created the database of on publishing. Then we came in and manually created the book rep table, created the customer table by importing an Excel spreadsheet and grabbing that information and using that as our table data. We manually, using the query wizard, created the customer query. We went through the regular form here, and I've got the customer from instead of customer form, which isn't good. It should be called customer form. And we went in through the create and the reports and also created the customer report. So it says you can use the following steps that are shown on the middle of page AC57 to compact and repair a database. Alright, so open the database to be compacted. Tap or click File on the ribbon to open up the Backstage view. We just did that. Okay. Tap or click the Compare, Compact, and Repair button. And as it says security warning, some active content has been disabled. Alright, I don't think that's going to really matter. I can enable the content there. I think it's now been compacted. Alright, so basically it's like a compression type of thing that if there's any wasted space in there, it's been removed. Alright, on the bottom of page 57 they tell you how you can close a database without exiting Access and how you can save a database to another name. On page 58 they talk about deleting a table or renaming an object. I just showed you the rename. If I didn't want a table, I could right mouse click and choose delete. Alright. Be very sure with a delete operation that you want to delete it and you're deleting the right thing, because normally there is not, for a delete, there is not an undo like there is for some other commands. Alright, the last thing that's discussed in the book, and I wanted to mention something to you before we even do this, and that is, I forgot about this, but I have access to a feature that's called CourseSmart, and you don't, unfortunately, but I can do that, and I can come in here and sign in, and I hope I remember my password because it's been a while. And I have online access to a lot of different books. Well, the reason I'm showing you that is one of the books I have access to, I think this is done by author name, so I've got to go down a ways and find the Pratt book, because at least the publisher had told me that they'd give me CourseSmart access to this. Sorry, I'm not trying to waste your time at all, but there we go. This is what I wanted to show you. So now I can go into your book, and I'm going to go up to page 58 in the book. Page 58 does not exist. Well, that's very strange. Oh, it's because it's AC 58. That does not exist. Oh boy. Wonder if it's AC space 58. That doesn't exist. All right, we'll find it. I'll just start working my way down here. There's AC 66, so I'm already close. 62, 60, 59. This should be 58. The reason that I'm doing this is the last part of the chapter that starts on page 58 and it goes on to page 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, and 63. The last 6 pages of the chapter begin our discussion on database design. And they mentioned on the middle of the page there that it's the process of determining the tables and fields that make up the database. All right? So what the author says under the requirements, because a lot of times what happens when you're a developer, you're given a set of requirements. A set of requirements, what that literally means is somebody gives you hard copy and or electronic copy and says, hey, this is what we want. They may show you what they currently have, but they'll basically show you or tell you what they want, and it's your job to create it. So, they mention here the Bavant Publishing database must maintain information on both customers and book reps. The business currently keeps this data in 2 Microsoft Word tables and 2 Excel workbooks. So we've already gone over and we've started to change that information. All right. And you can see on the top of the next page, that's the information that we brought in from the spreadsheet. And that was the information that was in a Word table. All right, so we're already moving it over, porting it over to Microsoft Access. Finally, they mentioned, turning up to page 60, says there, Bavant keeps track of which customers are assigned to which book reps. Well, we've already seen that. So they're starting to come through and think about how to design this database. This is a key component of this chapter. What we're going to do, I'm going to give one more lecture in this chapter. When I get done with the chapter, I'm going to actually do the assignment that I'm going to give you, and I'm going to ask you to replicate that. I'm not going to do that for all 7 chapters. That would be silly. Very time consuming for me, but I am going to do it for the first chapter so you know exactly what I'll be looking for. But you will have an assignment like that in each chapter, and in addition I'm going to give you one more assignment where I'm going to ask you to basically, I'm going to give you a set of requirements and I'm going to ask you to develop your own database based off of those requirements and put it into Access. That won't be ready for probably until around the time the semester starts. Alright, so this database design process. What's the first step? They mentioned you want to identify the tables. Examine the requirements to identify the main objects that are going to be involved. They will typically each be a table. In our case, we already know there are 2 tables. There's a customer table, and there's a book rep table. Then we have to determine what are going to be the primary keys for each table. And notice what we're doing here. What we're going to do is we're going to say the name of the table, then in parentheses all of the fields. All right, and the primary key, the unique record identifier, will typically be the first field, and it will be underlined. It is possible, it is permissible to have a primary key that is more than one field. That's called a concatenated or a composite primary key. We'll look at that, we'll get into that later. So then we come up and we figure out what other fields we need. We want to determine the additional fields. This is shown on page 61 in your book. So the customer table will have customer number, customer name, street, city, state, postal code, amount paid, current date, returns. The book rep will have book rep number, last name, first name, street, city, state, postal code, start date, salary, and bonus rate. All right? All right. It says what happens is the fourth step. Now you have to determine how you're going to have those tables be related to one another. All right? Most good, well-written databases are written as databases with what are called one-to-many relationships. Why am I telling you that? Well, if you remember, I showed you this thing a while ago. Well, I thought I saved it. Maybe I didn't. So I'm going to bring it back again. Book rep and customer. And we'll take a look at this more in a later chapter, I believe. But I guess the customer should have been first. There we go. So again, I'm going to drag on this primary key, and I'm going to drag down to here. What do we have? Oh, I was right in the beginning. All right. So I've got book rep number here, and I've also got it in here. So I drag and I drag, and again, we'll go over what all this stuff means in a later chapter. But what I've done is I've established a relationship between these two tables based on the book rep number field. And it says for every one, and that's what that means, for every one book rep has an infinite number of customers. Now, not truly infinite, but what that means is 0 or more. So every book rep has 0 or more customers. All right, I'm going to actually click the save button on here. I thought that saved it when we did that, but I don't know if it is or not. Save layout. Okay. So this is a one-to-many relationship. All right, so the primary key from the one or the parent table is included in the child or the many table as what's called a foreign key. Again, we'll get into all this stuff in more depth and breadth of coverage as we go on. All right, just a couple more things. Please read your book. I'm meant to kind of augment what's in the book. When people tell me, Jeff, I've taken your class and I never even opened the book, or I never bought the book and I got an A, you're not making me feel good by doing that, because there's a lot of information that there's just not enough time to go over. So it's of paramount importance that you are constantly reading the book. All right, so what you get out of this are these two tables. And you'll notice book rep number is in this table, and it's in this table. Here it's a primary key. Here it's what's called a foreign key. A foreign key is typically when you have a one-to-many relationship like we have between book rep and customer, where you take the primary key of the one side and you add it to the many side as a field so that you are able to relate those two tables together. All right. Next, we want to remove redundancy. And redundancy, actually, I gave you, believe it or not, a really good example of redundancy when we first started, and I showed you that spreadsheet that I'd created, where we had the where we had the department name for each department put in there, and you saw that IT was in there 5 times and accounting was in there 5 times, etc. All right. So redundancy means storing the same fact as it says there in more than one place. It usually comes from placing too many fields in a table. All right? This is what you wouldn't want. You want Perez, Molina, I guess Molina Perez, and Robert Chin to only appear in one table. Their associated number may appear in many tables, and that's what we're talking about in here. So the solution, as they mention on page 63, well, what are the problems with redundancy? Wasted storage space, more complex updates, possible inconsistent data that leads to something called anomalies. Those are never good things. So how do you eliminate redundancy? Typically by creating more tables. So notice in here now, the book rep number is in here, but we have another table that has just last name and first name. All right. So actually in the table that we looked at, in the book rep table, this is not written. Oh, where is it? I guess it is. It is. What we could have done here. Well, actually, the way that it's set up, that's okay. Let's see. And over here, we've just got the book rep number. Good. That's the way that it should be. On the bottom of page 63, as we end this lecture, the author says here on the bottom of the page, designing to omit redundancy will help you to produce good and valid database designs. This is an art, and it's a science. Okay, and what I mean by that is it's a science in that typically there is a set of rules that if you follow them, you'll get the correct results, but it's an art in that two different people can design a database in different ways and both be correct. The example I've given to classes before is I've said things like this. Imagine that I was teaching a beginning art class, and on the first day of class, I came in with literally with a bowl of fruit. So there were some bananas in there, some grapes, some oranges, some apples. We'll just leave it at that. And I said to everybody who was in the class, now I want you to paint what you see. Now some people would paint everything, but other people might accentuate and say, well, the bananas are a lot bigger, so I'm going to make them, but just concentrate on the bananas or just concentrate on the grapes, etc. Are any of them wrong? They're painting what they see. And in many ways, database developers and designers do things the way that they're comfortable with or the way that they see them. It's always important as you're going through all this stuff, it's always important that if you're doing work for another person or another company, that you keep them in the loop at all times. All right, so that ends chapter 1. Now, what I'm going to do on every chapter from 1 to 7, what I'm going to assign in this chapter, it is on page, starts on the bottom of page 69 and it goes on to page 70. It's lab number 2, and it's entitled Creating the Tennis Logos Database. All right. Now it says Tennis Logos supplies customized tennis clothing and accessories for clubs and tournaments. The company purchases these items from suppliers at wholesale prices and adds a customer's logo. The final item price is determined by marking up the wholesale price and adding a fee based on the complexity of the logo. Tennis Logos also does graphic design work for customers. Currently, the information about the items and suppliers is stored in 2 Excel workbooks. Each item is assigned to a specific supplier, but each supplier may have many items. So there's a one-to-many relationship between supplier and items. You are to create a database that will store the item and supplier information. You already have determined that you need 2 tables, a supplier table and an item table. It says to complete this assignment, I'm going to be responsible for getting you that information. You will be required to use the data files for students. All right, or you can visit there yourself to get more information. So what I'm going to do, I'm done with this lecture, but I'm going to come back and I'm going to go over all 12 of these steps that you're being assigned for the first assignment.